Hi y'all, today we are talking about how I did in April for my low spend year. And this is as promised from the March review, which came out quite late. So make sure you go down and I'll link the playlist in the description if you want to see my previous low spend year videos. And this video is a little bit special because I have some really big news at the end of the video. If you like this kind of video, please like and subscribe. And like I said, there'll be a playlist link below for you so that you can look at all of the other months, especially if you're coming into this later than around the time that I posted it. If you want a more extensive background on why I'm doing my low spend year, I review that in my January video. Just essentially, I'm trying to pay off my car this year. So let's get into what I did in April. For April, our total household expenses ended up being $5,327.01. And that total includes our mortgage, our escrow, internet, car insurance, pet insurance, groceries, electricity, natural gas, water and sewer, phone lines, our HOA, Amazon Prime subscription, and all of the kids' expenses like diapers, wipes, healthcare, health insurance, and of course, daycare. So this month, daycare was about $2,500 of that $5,000 plus. So that's the big household picture. My part of that this month was $2,663.51. And so that is the household picture. My personal expenses outside of those household expenses include my car payment, which is $385.54. I spent $29.90 on gas this month. I spent $33.46 on like personal toiletry items that I generally don't like to put on our normal kind of groceries or household supply bill. And that's because they're a little bit more expensive than the bargain brand kind of stuff. They're not super expensive, but they're expensive enough where it feels like a little bit of a luxury. But I'm also in my 40s and I know what I like toiletry wise, and I am willing to pay a little bit extra to get those. And that's allowed as long as I have run out of the previous item that I was using. So that was all good. Then I spent $59.64 on gifts. Now in April, my Achilles heel was meal planning. I did not do very well with meal planning this past month, so I ended up buying kind of more lunch and snack foods at the grocery store on the way to work, and then also, getting an occasional coffee or snack while I was at work, just because I wasn't taking leftovers from work and I wasn't packing my lunch the night before and making sure that I had stuff to take in with me. So that was not great because that was one of the main things that I realized I was spending quite a bit of money on last year that I just felt was wasteful, since there's obviously a much cheaper way to do that rather than buying frozen meals or pre-prepared stuff as opposed to just taking in leftovers. So I was really trying not to do that this year, but it is what it is. So that food spending totaled to $128.72 because, like I said, it's really just truly amazing how quickly those little purchases add up when I get kind of complacent about it. And like I said, it was honestly just a lack of meal planning, and that's one of the kind of budgetary fallouts that happen when I'm being lazy with meal planning. So all of my personal expenses together were $637.26, so the grand total of my household and personal expenses was $3,300.77. My take-home pay was $3,762.41. So my income less my expenses month left me with an extra $461.64, which I did put towards paying down the principal of my car loan. So then I had $7,657.62 left on my car loan. So over $450 extra. It's not too bad. That extra food spending did make a significant dent, though. It could have been closer to like $600 if I hadn't spent that money, but it is what it is. Now for the big news. You may have noticed before that I said I had $7,657.62 left on my car loan, as in past tense, used to. So each month when I pay bills, I kind of check in on where everything is financially for me. And one thing that I noticed this month was that the interest rate on my high yield savings account went down again. So that's not surprising. That's kind of expected because of just the world and what's happening right now, right? You know, interest rates are going down. That's good for some things and bad for other things, like my high yield savings account. So I do use a high yield savings account as my safe place for my emergency fund. And I just like to keep a 6-month emergency fund available because, you know, I mean, shit happens, right? You know, your car breaks down and it's super expensive to fix, or you have a dental emergency or some other kind of medical emergency, or just who knows, you know, things happen. So I like to keep 6 months of like absolutely necessary expenses in a high yield savings account. But I looked at that interest rate and then I looked at my car loan interest rate and I did a little bit of math. And it used to be more fiscally advantageous to let that money in my emergency fund keep growing, let it sit there and keep growing with the interest rate, what the interest rate used to be, because it was growing at a faster rate than I was losing money to the car loan interest, right? So that makes sense. I'm getting more interest over here than I'm losing over here. So net positive result, right? But with this latest drop, that's no longer the case. So I was at a decision point here, and I had to figure out, do I leave my emergency fund untouched and keep to the current course, the current plan of paying down my car as quickly as I could, just using my monthly income? Or was it time to use some of that money in my emergency fund, even though this isn't technically an emergency, but use some of that money and move it to pay off the car? Ultimately, I decided to take the money from my emergency fund and pay off the car loan. It just made more sense mathematically, and I will say it felt a little risky emotionally because I'm very risk averse when it comes to money. But I knew that it would also feel good to own the car outright and not have to deal with the payments, but just like it took me a while to build up that 6-month emergency fund because I built it up a while ago when I didn't have a lot of extra money coming in. And it's just, you know, there's somewhat of a weird emotional attachment to having 6 months worth in there, even though that's a completely arbitrary money or an arbitrary measurement by, it's like you have to have 10,000 steps a day. Well, like you don't actually, you know, all the people who are quote unquote in the know say you have to have a 6 months emergency fund. And it's just, but anyway, so that felt a little emotional risky to me. But yeah, I decided it would feel better and logically would be better to go ahead, pay off the car, own it outright, not have to deal with monthly payments. So I did pay off my car loan this past month after I had already made those payments. So that feels great that I will not have a car payment for quite some time, hopefully. The car I have is fairly reliable. It's a Honda CR-V. My brother-in-law is a mechanic, so trust him to keep that running for me for a very long time. However, so that's all great. Yay, that's done. But what does that mean for my low spend year, right? I'm doing this low spend year. I told you in the beginning that I'd be doing it all year and having these check-ins each month. So I need to continue my low spend year, obviously, because just because I moved money and it took a quicker way out of my car loan, it doesn't mean that I didn't still spend the money. So I will be doing the low spend year still, but I will, instead of paying the car loan company, I will be repaying myself into my emergency fund and building that fund back up. So taking that amount of money out dipped my emergency fund from a 6-month fund to like a 4.5-ish month fund, because you have to remember that now I have almost a $400 bill just non-existent in my needs category now. So I don't need as much of money in the emergency fund to make up a 6-month emergency fund. So that's lovely. But for a true 6-month emergency fund, I'll probably need to pay myself back a little bit under $5,000. I think I worked it out. It's around $4,900. So that is going to be the new purpose of my goal for my low spend year. It's still kind of an aggressive goal, even if it isn't as much as paying off the car. But I do know that I have some larger expenses coming up, so I'm not always going to be able to put that as much as I've been putting towards my car payment away. You know, I know in the next few months there are some planned gifts that are a little bit more expensive. I have travel for a family wedding where, you know, I'm getting 2 nights of a hotel, and there'll be gas and food for those days when I'm gone. But I will be thrilled if I can build that fund back up in the rest of the year. So that's still something exciting that I can work towards. And there is a physical amount dedicated to it where I can say, yes, I definitely hit this benchmark. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I just said that. This benchmark, maybe a bitch mark along the way. I don't know. Yes, I definitely hit this benchmark, or no, I did not put that money away, and here's how much I still have to go. So that still feels really good to me, and I'll be ecstatic if I can do it by the end of this year. So I will try to attempt to stop rambling now, but I hope that isn't too discouraging of a twist for folks who are following along or who may be using my challenge as motivation for their own challenge, because I know that was kind of like a quick fix, and I know a lot of people cannot do that because maybe they're just not in a situation where they have that level of an emergency fund, or maybe they're just not comfortable touching that. However, I needed to do what made the most sense for me, and just holding on to that money didn't seem like it was going to serve me as well as paying the car off early and making this pivot on that goal. That is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. I hope that you will continue on this journey with me, and please like and subscribe, and I will see you the next time. Bye.